The silence in the executive hallway felt louder than a scream. Ethan Brooks sat alone on a leather bench outside the conference room of his own company, staring at the closed glass doors while employees walked past without even recognizing him. His navy suit looked no different from anyone else's, and that morning he had intentionally left his security team behind. He wanted to see his company through ordinary eyes. 6 minutes. That was how long he sat there. 6 minutes while laughter echoed from inside the conference room. 6 minutes while the executives he personally hired ignored the meeting they were supposed to attend. 6 minutes that changed everything. What would you do if you built something from nothing, sacrificed years of your life for it, and then discovered the people you trusted had forgotten why it existed in the first place? Ethan knew struggle better than anyone in that building. 10 years earlier, he had been sleeping in his pickup truck with his 4-year-old son, Mason. His wife, Rachel, had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him alone with a grieving child and mountains of medical debt. There were nights when Ethan skipped meals so Mason could eat. There were mornings when he drove across 3 counties, searching for construction jobs that paid enough to keep the lights on for another month. Most people saw the billionaire. Almost nobody remembered the broken father. The company began in a tiny rented garage in Ohio. Ethan repaired industrial equipment during the day and designed efficiency software at night, while Mason slept on a small cot nearby. He worked until his hands bled. He worked through holidays. He worked through exhaustion and loneliness. Every decision had one purpose: giving his son a future that felt safe. Years later, investors arrived, contracts followed. Then came national expansion. By 42, Ethan was one of America's most respected business leaders. Yet the thing he valued most was never money. It was dignity. He believed every employee deserved respect, whether they cleaned floors or signed contracts. He remembered too clearly what it felt like to be invisible. That morning, Ethan had arrived unannounced for a quarterly leadership meeting. The meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp. At 9 o'clock, the executives weren't there. Through the glass walls, he could see them gathered in smaller groups, drinking coffee, laughing, scrolling through phones, and chatting about vacation, homes and luxury cars. Several employees waiting for approvals looked nervous and exhausted. Nobody seemed concerned about wasting other people's time, including his. Ethan watched a young receptionist walk past carrying a stack of files. Her shoulders looked tense. A few minutes later, he quietly asked how things were going. The answer broke his heart. The receptionist, Jessica, thought he was simply another manager. She admitted that many executives routinely arrived late, ignored staff concerns, and postponed important decisions for weeks. Employees often stayed late correcting mistakes created by leadership's carelessness. Then she said something Ethan would never forget. She explained that her father had recently lost his job, and she was working extra hours to help her family survive. Several times she had requested approval for a scheduling adjustment, so she could care for her younger brother after school. The request had sat unanswered for nearly 2 months, not because it was difficult, because nobody bothered reading it. Ethan thanked her and sat back down, his chest tightened. He remembered Mason at that same age waiting for him after school because there was no one else. He remembered the fear, the guilt, the helplessness, and suddenly those 6 minutes felt much longer. At 9:06, the executives finally entered the conference room. Their laughter faded the moment Ethan followed them inside. Faces turned pale. Coffee cups froze midway to lips. No one expected to see the company's founder sitting quietly at the end of the table. The meeting began. For nearly 20 minutes, Ethan listened. He listened to presentations filled with impressive numbers and polished charts. Revenue was rising. Profits were strong. Shareholders were happy. Everything looked successful. Everything looked perfect, until Ethan started asking questions. questions about employee turnover, questions about delayed approvals, questions about ignored complaints, question about morale surveys that mysteriously disappeared from reports. One executive stumbled through an explanation. Another blamed middle management. A third claimed the concerns were isolated incidents. Ethan simply listened. Then he opened a folder. Inside were hundreds of pages gathered from employee interviews conducted over the previous 6 months. Stories of overworked staff. Stories of ignored requests. Stories of talented people leaving because they felt unseen. Stories that sounded painfully familiar to the man who once slept in a truck with his son. The room became silent. No chart could hide the truth anymore. Ethan looked around the table and saw something he never expected. Not incompetence, indifference, and to him, that was worse. Money could be recovered. Mistakes could be corrected. But a leader who stopped caring could destroy countless lives. He thought about Jessica. He thought about every employee carrying burdens nobody else could see. Then he made his decision. Before noon, 3 senior executives were terminated. The news spread through headquarters like wildfire. Some employees were shocked. Others quietly cried. Not because people lost their jobs, because someone had finally listened. The following months brought dramatic changes. Managers were required to spend time with frontline employees every week. Approval systems were simplified. Employee support programs expanded. Leadership evaluations included compassion and responsiveness. Not just financial performance. Many investors questioned the changes. Some analysts predicted lower profits. Ethan didn't care. For the first time in years, the company felt human again. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Ethan received a handwritten letter. It was from Jessica. She thanked him for approving her schedule request. She explained that her younger brother had graduated with honors and earned a college scholarship. She wrote that her family was finally stable after difficult years. At the bottom of the page was a sentence that brought tears to Ethan's eyes. She wrote that one small act of attention had changed the direction of her family's future. Ethan folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a drawer beside an old photograph of Rachel and Mason. That evening, he sat alone in his office after everyone had gone home. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows. His company was worth billions. Yet the greatest reward wasn't the wealth, the buildings, or the recognition. It was knowing that somewhere, a young woman had been given a chance because somebody finally chose to notice her. As he looked at the photograph, Ethan realized something many powerful people never learn. Success is not measured by how many people work for you. It is measured by how many lives become better because you cared. And sometimes, the most important decision a leader makes begins with 6 quiet minutes of waiting. Before you go, tell us in the comments, have you ever felt invisible when all you needed was for someone to truly listen? And remember, if this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, only if it genuinely inspired you to believe in kindness, dignity, and the power of second chances.